Rudy Giuliani and Michael Eric Dyson went at it on Meet the Press over crime and race. This is fascinating. Let's listen, and then I'll give you the reality afterwards.
But the fact is, I find it very disappointing that you're not discussing the fact that 93% of blacks in America are killed by other blacks. We're talking about the exception here.
Well, look, first of all,
go ahead, Michael. No, but this is about a trust issue.
We are talking about the significant exception. 93% of blacks are killed by other blacks.
Let me respond to that.
I would like to see the attention. I'd like to see the attention paid to that you are paying to this, and the solutions to that.
He's taking up time. Can I say this? First of all, most black people who commit crimes against other black people go to jail. Number two, they are not sworn by the police department as a agent of the state to uphold the law. So in both cases, that's a false equivalency that the mayor has drawn, which has exacerbated tensions that are deeply embedded in American culture. Black people who kill black people go to jail. White people who are policemen who kill black people do not go to jail. If a jury can indict a ham sandwich, why is it taking so long?
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you, it's the trust issue, though. This is a trust issue.
It's hardly insignificant.
I didn't say it was insignificant. I said it was out of proportion in your false equivalency, sir.
It is the reason for the heavy police presence in the black community.
Not at all. Not at all.
93%.
The police presence cannot make a distinction between those who are criminals and those who call the police to stop the criminals.
What about the poor black child that is killed by another black child? Why aren't you protesting that?
Those people go to jail. I do protest it. I'm a minister. They go to jail. Why don't you talk about the way in which white policemen have undercut the ability of Americans to live?
So why don't you cut it down so many white police officers don't have to be in black areas?
They don't have to be. It's a matter of the effect of the state occupying those forces, sir.
How about 70 to 75% of the crime in my
your attitude reinforces the problematic perspective that prevails in the culture, sir.
This is a debate. How about you reduce crime?
This is a debate.
When I become mayor, I'll do that.
The white police officers won't be there if you weren't killing each other.
Hang on.
The defensive mechanism of white supremacy at work in your mind.
All right, Mike, I got it. I'm going to stop it there. Michael Eric Dyson, Mayor Giuliani, as you can see, this has a lot of tension to it.
This is an argument that we hear all the time, and Republicans are so convinced by it, but I'll explain why it's bullshit. So they say what Giuliani says right there, that over 90% of black victims are killed by other blacks. Now, what's implied when you bring up that statistic? Keep it real. There's a wink and a nod to racists. And what you're saying is, you know how they are. They're violent by their nature. Just look at the stats. It's not me saying it, it's the stats saying it. Now, what are they leaving out? Because what they're ignoring, it totally changes the conversation and totally changes the picture of what was just described. What percentage of white victims are killed by other white people? The last available data is for 2011. It's 83%. Rudy, why are you ignoring the epidemic of white-on-white crime? I mean, the reason for those numbers is that, what? You tell me, man. The white people really got to get their shit together, don't they? I mean, 83%? How dare you focus on black people and say, oh, look at the crime coming from the black community, when 83% of the people killing white people are other white people? You know, maybe you should denounce the violence in the white community, because if you don't, I mean, we're all just going to have to assume that by default you agree with the violence. See what's going on here? That's exactly the argument that white racists make to black people. Why don't good black people come out and disavow the violence of bad black people? I don't get it. Don't you want to be one of the good ones? The same thing, Rudy. Nobody says that to Rudy Giuliani, even though the statistics for white people are the same. See the double standard that we got going on here? The underlying premise of the people who make that argument that Rudy made is, come on, you know how they are. We know black people are worse. We know black people are more violent. Now, the reason for those numbers is that black people mostly live around other black people, and white people mostly live around other white people. So, of course, you're going to have 90-some-odd% of black people being victims of crimes from other black people. Of course, you're going to have about the same number for white people because, again, that's who you're around. If you're somebody who's in a heavily African-American area, what are you going to do? Drive an hour and 30 minutes to get to a white area and commit a crime there? See, that's the thing. These things aren't discussed in context and in perspective. Now, here's the real reason why blacks are disproportionately in jail, because that's the other argument they make. Just, hey, look at the numbers, there's more black people in jail as a percentage, so clearly there's a problem in that community. But the reason why they are is because of the drug war, that white people and black people use drugs at similar rates, but black people get arrested 4 to 6 times more often. These are studies that show this. So that's one of the main reasons. But then also, let's be honest, poverty is another big aspect of this. If you're in poverty, you're more likely to turn to crime to try to get means to continue to survive. And also racism. I've told this story on air before. I know Republicans hate it when you mention that, but racism still exists. Look, I grew up in a very multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial environment, multi-religious, you name it. And on the north end of town, which was predominantly white, you could do fucking keg stands in your front lawn if you're high school kids and nobody bothers you. My friend lived next to a judge and we would stand out in the front and do fucking keg stands and smoke weed. Nothing happened ever. But if you're on the south end and you're on your front porch quietly smoking a joint, the cops will come and fucking tackle you and bring you to jail. Why? Because cops are told, don't patrol the affluent white areas, go patrol the poor black areas. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of who gets arrested and who goes to jail and all this stuff. I mean, how do you not see this, man? It's so obvious, it's so in your face. But Rudy Giuliani would rather cover his eyes and scream that all the problems with black people ever are because of the black community. And finally, like Michael Eric Dyson said in the middle there, why is this even in the conversation? The original conversation was about Ferguson, what's happening in Ferguson. And the panel was like, well, we hope he gets indicted so at least there's a fucking trial. And Rudy Giuliani goes right to, but black people hurt black people too. Ah! Okay, but what does that have to do with the conversation? We're talking about should there be justice with Darren Wilson. And you're like, black on black violence. Do you agree that he should be punished? But black people hurt black people too. So you're avoiding the question, and we will take away from that in fact you don't want Darren Wilson to be brought to justice because you wouldn't be avoiding the question if you believed it.